It's not going to be a massively long video, this one, which you may be glad to hear. I was just really in a bit of a gap because I'm waiting for some parts to arrive, which obviously we've just had the Easter weekend, which is, has slowed down parts deliveries quite understandably. And I thought I'd mention this table radio here. It's not really got a lot wrong with it. I don't know if there's anything really wrong with it. But it's interesting in the context of the Grundig we looked at the other day, because this is a sort of British version of the table radio from, I guess, roughly the same era, perhaps a little later. I think Radio Museum said it was 78. I mean, it would certainly be no earlier than 78, and I can tell that because of the markings. The Grundig didn't have station markings on except for medium wave, and obviously had them all from a German point of view. But you can see here that we now have Radio 1, 275, 285, Radio 2 here on medium wave, and Radio 4 on long wave. So that happened in November 1978. So it could have been manufactured in advance of that, whether because they'd have known about the changes coming, or it's more likely, I suspect, that it's 79, 80-ish. And certainly the styling looks a bit 1980s. And there's another reason why I'd put it around that date. I've got a number of Fidelity radios, and I quite like the Fidelities. A lot of people think they're a bit second rank, and not to mention in the same breath as a Grundig, and certainly not a Hacker or a Roberts. But somebody made a comment a few days ago on a video I did ages back on a Fidelity and said how neat it all looked internally. It hadn't struck me at the time, but when I look back at the video, it's quite right. Anyway, back to the plot. None of the Fidelity radios I'd ever seen until I saw this one looked anything like this. Then I sort of did a bit of research, and in fact there was a CB set that was basically the same case, and it looked as if the two were supposed to go next to one another. So when you weren't chatting to your friends on CB, you were able to check out a bit of Radio Luxembourg or whatever. Now, I don't know a lot about CB radio. It's not something I ever really got into. It seemed quite romantic to me to be doing all this stuff when you were driving a massive Peterbilt down the interstate in the USA, but not so much with an Austin J2 on the Ossett bypass. Nevertheless, there was a big CB following. Now, somebody did a video on restoring the CB chassis version of this, and I'm going to put a link to that in the video so you'll see that somewhere, as long as you're not watching it on your telly. Going back to look at this radio, compared to the Grundig, it's got the same wave bands. It goes up to 108 megahertz, so this makes it quite usable nowadays. Unlike the Grundig, it has a tone control, which, if you remember, I said I didn't really think the Grundig needed a tone control because the sound on it was quite good anyway. As I said, 3 wave bands, but in addition to selecting those, if you select FM, you've also got the option for 4 presets on FM. Now, I think we've seen this on other radios before, but what happens if you turn it around, you'll see you've got 4 little presets here, which are a bit like you used to have on your older tellies, where you used to set the channel numbers for your channels 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the days before we actually had channel 4. So you can tune these in for your 4 preset FM channels here, which is also quite a handy thing. Round the back of it, there's not very much really. There's no audio input like there was on the Grundig. There is a 300 ohm aerial input, although you'll see hanging out the back there's a bit of wire here as an FM aerial, but you can put an external 300 ohm feed into there. It has a headphone output, and that's about it. Well, that's exactly it, in fact. Anyhow, let's plug it in and see what it sounds like.
And the A14 is showing as queuing at the moment westbound at junction 18 for Spaldwick. That's the other side of Cambridge. More to come in half an hour.
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Berries, yes. Yeah, blueberries are great, and raspberries, they're great. Flavonoids and all that in them. So that, and then the other thing, the really important thing is this brain training, which is quite specific.
The condol of Israel Defense Forces to the families.
Talk sport with Bostic.
Long wave didn't sound very good there because it's got a ferrite rod aerial that in fact is pointing in the wrong direction. You have to turn it round. Now this is a problem for this one. The Grundig did have an AM aerial input as well. This one doesn't, so you have to be facing in the right direction, which may not actually work out depending on the layout of your kitchen or your sideboard or whatever. That said, you know, Radio 4 long wave is definitely on its way out now. In a year's time, I suspect there'll be nothing on the long wave band in this country, and unfortunately I suspect in 2 or so years' time there'll be nothing on the medium wave band either. But the FM, as you can hear, sounded pretty good. So that's about it, really. There's not much else to say about it. If I was to put it up against the Grundig, like I said, there's some pluses and minuses. I don't think it's outclassed in any way by the Grundig. You might prefer the retro 70s styling of Grundig, or you might prefer the grey and silver 1980s styling of the Fidelity, but they're both quite good sets. I suspect this was a little bit cheaper, although I don't know. I've not been able to find out what this cost. But Fidelities certainly weren't, I don't think, at the top end of the price range. Given that someone mentioned that the other Fidelity had quite a nice layout, though, I think we'll take it apart and have a look inside it. Screw City, Arizona here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws on the bottom, and then, so I can tell, we've got a similar number, is it? We've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws on the back. So it's quite a lot to take apart, and I think we have to get all these out. In order to get it apart. It looks like there's a sort of slot or a sort of split there, and so hoping that will lift off. Yeah, here we go. I've realised what I've failed to do, which is to take off this tuning knob. Do we have to take that? Well, it looks like we have to take that. So the other reason it won't come off is that the nut holding the tuning thing in, I think, is also holding the case together, so it looks like we're going to take that off as well. Now it comes off. Or does it? Oh, sorry. 2 more knobs to pull off at the front. And finally, the front lifts off. It's got the right, so as you can see, the speaker is attached to it. The speaker is a Audax, so that's quite a reasonable quality speaker there. Yeah, so with a new camera position and a bit of lighting, we can take a better look at it. It actually does look quite well laid out. We've got the mains transformer over here, and you notice how they've angled it away here. The reason why they put it at this angle is to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the ferrite rod, so that's a reasonable touch that shows they've thought about it a little bit. Otherwise, there is an IC here, and I can't see quite what it is. UA721, so guessing that's some sort of op-amp thing. I notice it has a lock-fit transistors. I'll just come in a little bit closer. So after the debacle of the old AF germanium series transistors, which we hear about on pretty much every one of these videos, this is obviously in the 1970s, 80s, and we have silicon transistors, but they had these little things called lock fits. You can always tell them by this semi-hexagonal section or whatever. And the point of them was that they had little protrusions on the pins which were very short, and the idea is when the people on the assembly line were putting them in, they could actually just push them in and they'd lock into place, which made it easier to go further down the line. They wouldn't fall out again. You could just turn the board upside down and flow solder it. Now, the problem was that they didn't realise that this had another issue, which is the stress of pushing it in the board on those pins tended to break the junction between the metal pin and the silicon. So these things were a bit problematic as well. Looking at the rest of it, not much to see. Electrolytics look to be in good shape. These presets are obviously varicap tuning. I don't have a circuit diagram for this of any sort, and I've not been able to find any trace of one. These are Alps potentiometers, so that's pretty good quality components there. They weren't really skimping on this. And looking at the switches, they look pretty solidly nicely made things as well. I've just noticed something else though. There's a lamp here, so that scale pointer is supposed to be illuminated, but I didn't see it light up when we turned it on. So Let's see if we can get that lamp out, and let's see if I've got one to replace it with. Well, this gets rather more curious. I've got the bulb out, but actually the bulb, I was trying to work out what voltage it's supposed to be, assuming it had failed, and I couldn't really read it, and I thought I'll just measure around the terminals to see what it gets. But the bulb is actually fine. I think it's a 6-volt bulb, and as you can see, it works. There's nothing wrong with the bulb. So there's obviously something wrong with the connections, those two thin wires that come off the board, or maybe the feed to the end of the thin wires. It looks like it's an AC fed bulb. As I said, I haven't got a circuit diagram, but it's only getting about 1.5 volts at the actual socket. So maybe this is just a simple wiring or dry joint type fix. Yeah, it turns out it was just cleaning up the bulb holder, really. It was a bit of bad contact in the bulb holder, and that was it. So the light's back on again now, so we'll have some illumination. Well, there we go. We've got some illumination. Not quite the Blackpool that we got from the Grundig, more the Stevenage Town Centre when they celebrated the opening of another branch of Greggs. But nevertheless, it's there now. So we've made some improvements to this, even though I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And overall, as I said, I think it's a good set, and it can stand its ground with the Grundig of that time. I do find these buttons a little bit, the fact that they don't all line up when they're pressed out is a bit takes a bit away from the quality feeling, I think, really. But they are quite, I quite like the look of them. It reminds me of those sort of executive intercoms, and you say, Miss Jones, can you send the next person in, please?
Hello, Perrin, on yellow. Yes. Yes, Miss Elliot, yes. Ah, yes, right, put him on green, would you? Thank you. Tony, I just... Tony, yes, just a minute. I told you to put him on green, you put him on red, because I'm on yellow. Tony Webster, Reggie Perrin here. There's a vague possibility I might be able to offer you a job.
So I think it looks quite good, and it would look even better if they'd bothered to line the things up. But then that's not... I've seen professional equipment with that sort of poor lineup as well. So I think it's a bit of a problem with these switches in general, especially after they've aged a bit. Anyway, bit of a shorter one today again, and a diversion further down the rabbit hole of tabletop radios. Perhaps we'll do something different next time.